Hello, welcome back to Reviews by ZH. Been meaning to do this for a while. This is about part 2 of 2023. My top records this year. Basically, records that I have high regard, like they are super replayable. They have pretty much every song is a song I would listen to over and over if I decide to re-listen to stuff over and over. I don't usually do that lately. Lately, I just react and listen to new stuff and then move on. But it's stuff that catches my ears and shows that it's a good album or EP. Let's start with the EPs. Um, from part 2, we have Psycho Frame, basically old school deathcore. Old school deathcore. Think MySpace era. Features members of Mood Ring. Uh, Another EP is Queen Kona's EP. It's just straight up modern metalcore that's short, sweet, to the point. Amberlin put out one of the best pop rock, pop, uh, punk-ish albums that they've put out in a long time. Yeah, there's tinges of true emo in there, but it's not straight up emo like other bands. Favorite song from that is Lacerate. Brand of Sacrifice put out a great EP. It shows the diversity of their sound. They are a deathcore band, but this EP showcased that even though they can stay in the deathcore sound, they can do melody. They can expand on the deathcore sound. Basically, they innovate deathcore in a much better way than some other bands have been. Frontiers with their first EP was perfect. My favorite song from the first EP is Mirage featuring Alpha Wolf. It mixes death. It's just straight up deathcore, modern deathcore. Um, Half Lives, the other great pop rock EP of part 2. It just moves so smoothly and so repeatable. Save Yourself is very much so in the invent animate sphere of metalcore, and that's been a sound of metalcore I've been gravitating towards, and they do it right. Now to get into the albums, going from the bottom to the top. The Ongoing Concept returned with a ripper of a mathcore record, very much so. Just it's prog and mathcore. They toe the line between those two wacky genres, and because that's what they are, they do different things than other bands in the metalcore realm. And they were a metalcore band with their first album, but then they got really wacky and they stayed wacky. Hot Mulligan put out, let's see who's in the second best emo album of part 2, and I'll talk about the best one later in this video. Hot Mulligan just, I mean, there's even a song on there called Betty that's just about his dog, and I have dogs. Well, I have a dog. I care for my parents' dog a lot, and it just hit home. Um, okay, let's see. From Joy put out one of the best grindcore records this year, and if you like that heavy as can be with wackiness. That's what grindcore is. Check out From Joy. An astonishing end. A band I had never heard of, but had apparently been around for the last 17 years. I checked out their album with Another Reactor on his stream. I listened to it, and then I went back, and it's just the MySpace deathcore sound, and that's the deathcore sound I have been gravitating towards lately. Blinded and Led to the Woods, a very rare death metal album that piqued my interest highly. Because it had tinges of deathcore. And the deathcore of blackenedness, but not completely. But it's a repeatable death metal album in my eyes, for my taste. Dead Vectors, Fall. And this band put out the best Fall album so far this year overall. I'll get into why it's better than a certain one that was put out in my part 3 video. Melamaya. This is prog deathcore / prog metalcore. And that's what they are. They use that Born of Osiris feel, and they go all in, and they give you the electronics, they give you the riffs, they give you everything you want. And that's what they are, is they do hop around into 2 different genres that show their fullness of their sound. Back to back to the Acacia Strain, the double album that are tied. One is quite literally doom metal-ish, stoner metal, with a little bit of grind into it. And my favorite song of the year comes from that album. And it's a 16-minute song. And I don't like super long songs, so that's how you know it hit me. And then their other album is just straight up deathcore with the hardcore tinge that they've been doing earlier in their career, and it's a ripper. And my favorite song off of that is Chain. Enter Shikari have stayed consistent. They released another great album, well, their first one since, I would say, A Flash Flood of Color, that really is revisitable. And that's because with this album, they mixed more of their older sounds together and incorporated the stuff that I did like from their last 2 or 3 albums. Because I didn't really like the last 2 or 3 albums, but they did enough of the good sounds from those albums, and they incorporated some of the songs did have the bad sounds from their earlier stuff, but their earlier stuff is just good in general. Great in general, actually. Currents put out the best so far Invent Animate metalcore sound album in this part, but it's not the best one of this year, and I'll talk about it in my part 3, which I'll film later probably and talk about in more depth. Trophy Eyes is the best emo album of this year. So good, and yet I can go back and re-listen to that despite how sad it is compared to other emo-ish albums that have come out over the past 3 years. For sure. And the same thing, the Amity Affliction went back to their original sound. They're my top album from this part, and they would have been my top album overall. But somehow part 3 does one up both of part 1 and part 2, and it was a busy part for me. I ended up listening to, in this part, 165 albums, and then in 165 releases, and then 105 in part 2, and then part 1, and then for part 3, I will tell you how many releases I listened to. 184. And yeah, and a lot of the releases for part 3, just giving a precursor, came from quite literally the weekend of this taping of this video, which was August 27th. I'll go over part 3 at a later time of the year. I want to divide this out and sit with part 3 a little bit more, because I could move some stuff down to move some other stuff up from part 3. But yeah. And I am going to move probably the bottom 4 to part 4, because I like to keep things equal. Yep. And I've moved on to part 4 for the year.